Morning, Brian. How are you?
Paula, if I was doing any better, I'd be worried.
All right. I like this because we have a hot topic today. So,
Hit me.
been chatting with a lot of friends, and literally everybody is in this craze of what
Mm,
is Bitcoin. So,
mm.
I would love to just get a better understanding. What is it? What are the different types? Like, I'm all ears.
Sure. Okay. It's a great question. It's definitely a hot topic right now. It's, the middle of March and Bitcoin just hit record highs. First, full disclosure, this isn't a recommendation that a person goes out there and goes, invest in it, buys it. The purpose of this conversation is going to be go do some homework on it, and hopefully we'll give you a little bit of an understanding of, what some of the meme coins are and what Bitcoin is, because they're two completely different things. Now, I will highly encourage everyone to buy this book and read it by a gentleman by the name of Saifedean Ammous. He's an economics professor, but this book was highly influential. It's a few years old now, highly influential to me to help understand what was going on with Bitcoin. Because when Bitcoin was first introduced to me, it was probably about 7 years ago. I was convinced it wasn't legit. It was, it was a scam, or I didn't know anything about it. And a mentor of mine said to me, Brian, the hallmark of maturity is being able to change your mind when presented with new information. And in 2019, at the end of the year, before, the craziness of COVID and pandemic and all that stuff happened, I started doing a little bit of homework on it. I wanted to understand a little bit better. And it completely changed my perspective, not just on Bitcoin itself, but on money in general. And we're going to leave that for another conversation. So let's just break it down very, very simply. There are two types of cryptocurrencies that we need to be paying attention to. The first is Bitcoin, and the second is everything else. Now, the everything else is going to be things like Dogecoin, Shiba. There's one that's literally called WIF, WIF, and it's a dog with a hat on it, right? For those of us who are of a certain age, we might remember things like Pokemon cards, right? Or what were they calling, Pogs or whatever, like collectibles. That's what most of the other coins are. So you have Bitcoin, and then you have everything else. Well, what's the difference between the two? First things first, Bitcoin is a software program. That's what Bitcoin is. And there will only ever be a specific number of coins ever available. There'll be 21 million Bitcoin ever available. And then we say available, the way a person can acquire Bitcoin is either purchasing it in the open market, on exchanges, or mining for it. It's like, what does mining for it mean? Well, Bitcoin is, for lack of a better explanation, or to simplify it, it's an accounting ledger. And it's one that everyone has the ability to see. And so when you compare that to like your bank, well, insert giant corporate bank too big to fail entity here, you don't know what's going on in their books, right? They're not going to tell you what's really happening behind the scenes. Bitcoin is completely different. It's a software protocol that states, as people check the transactions and validate the transactions, that's called mining, they will receive Bitcoin as a reward for doing that work. And that work is builds on a concept called proof of work. It shows, just like you go to work for an hour, you get paid for an hour. The paycheck you got is proof that you did the work, right? It's a similar concept, but this is purely software. What's interesting about Bitcoin, however, is that no one person can control it now. When it was brand new, sure, one person could basically effectively dominate all of it, but it's now distributed over tens of thousands of miners. They call them nodes. Some of them are real big, massive corporate operations. Others are, somebody just running a little Bitcoin node or a computer, a mining in their home. In fact, a lot of people are doing the mining in their home, and the system that they're using generates enough heat that they can heat their house with.
Wow.
This is pretty crazy. So fundamentally, Bitcoin is a limited supply. It's called hard money, a hard asset. Hard means it's very difficult to acquire more of it. You can't just magically create it like they do with most fiat currencies. Fiat means government created, right? So the government, the United States, the Federal Reserve can basically print as many dollars, create as many dollars as they want. That's fiat, F-I-A-T, not the car. Bitcoin's polar opposite. There will only ever be 21 million Bitcoin available. Now, each Bitcoin has 100 million pieces to it. Just like $1 has 100 cents to it, one Bitcoin has 100 million sats or SATS. And it's just shorthand for the person who created the program. His name is Satoshi Nakamoto. So you have one Bitcoin equals 100 million sats. There will only ever be 21 million of them. All right. So Bitcoin has become the most dominant cryptocurrency because everyone can validate the transactions. Whereas if you think, what is the opposite of that? Well, when you write a check from your bank account and you give it to me for services rendered, I don't know if you wrote another check to someone else for the exact same amount and my check is going to bounce because you didn't have the money in the account. There's a risk there, right? That's called double spending. We've heard of people doing that, overdrafting or just writing a check that they knew was going to bounce. That's impossible with Bitcoin because everyone, all 20-odd thousand nodes that are running the software, running the ledger, that have to all agree. And this happens every 10 minutes. They have to all agree on every transaction that happened on the network. So if someone tried to do something shady, the other 19,999 odd nodes or whatever there are that are out there will invalidate that transaction. So it cannot be double spent. That's why governments really don't like it, because governments get away creating money out of nowhere, right? You can't do that with Bitcoin. And so because that's the word to use there is called immutable. You can't fool around with it. And so people over time have begun gravitating towards Bitcoin because it's easily transferable over the internet. It's basically internet money, if you will. It's hard money, meaning it can't be diluted because someone decided to create more. We're going to remember that because that's what happens with all the other coins. And ultimately, it's becoming not only a means of transaction, but it's on a path now where it's likely going to be a store of value. When I say store of value, that's what gold historically had been. But gold's difficult to transact commercially. If you decided tomorrow you're going to go buy oil from some country in the Middle East, you're not going to put a few tons of gold on a boat. Chances are that boat's either going to get, pirated and they're going to steal it, or it sinks, right? So gold is very difficult to use over long distances. Digital money, well, we already know that because we transact digitally all the time. So Bitcoin, and we can get further in depth. Again, I highly encourage you to read the book because Saifedean gets very deep into why this is a solution for many of the problems that we're seeing. So many of the problems that we have, especially here in the United States and in the West in general, these problems are a result of fake money, monopoly money. And so the other coins, while they are digital and they're cryptographically, created, and cryptographic, it's a fancy word for keys, right? Security, if you will. Well, the fundamental difference between Bitcoin and a lot of these other coins, hardcore Bitcoiners, they call Bitcoin maximalists, call the other coins shit coins, right? I tend to agree to some extent with some of them, but a lot of them you got to look at them like collector's items, if you will, because some of them are funny to see. A whole bunch of them popped up this week that were actually cartoonish and hysterical. But the fundamental difference between Bitcoin and the rest is that all of the other coins can have more coins created, there is a centralized entity, whether it's an individual or, for lack of a better phrase, a corporation, you can treat it, that can create more coins, whatever that coin might be. And there's a few of them that are popular. There's things like, most of them are built on, or all of them are built on the Ethereum network, Ethereum technology. It's a different type of currency. You have things like Solana, you have, again, Dogecoin, you have Ripple, all these different ideas. Now, fundamentally, if they decide, whoever's in control of this, of that coin specifically, they can create more. And when they create more coin, it dilutes the value of your coin. No different than the dollar. If you and I each had, $10, and then another $20 was created. Right? You and I had $10 each, total of 20. All of a sudden, another $20 is created. Now there's $40 in circulation. Before, you and I had half of the purchasing power. $10, $20 total. Now all of a sudden there's $40. You and I each have $10. Instead of you and I each having half of the purchasing power, now we have 1/4. We have a quarter of it, because now it's getting diluted. If we can simplify that, it's someone's watering down your drink. And now you got to drink a lot more just to feel the same way you did with the one original drink. That's what's happening with our currency. That's what happens with these other coins. In the long run, the immutable nature, the hard nature of Bitcoin, the fact that it can never be more than 21 million. And it's a program. It is written into the program. So you can't believe anybody says, oh, they're going to make more of it. No, not Bitcoin. You can't do that with Bitcoin, because you have to get all 20,000 nodes to agree to that. When that has happened in the past, they call it a fork. And it has happened before, but none of the forks have become as popular as the original, the OG, right? So over time, Bitcoin has become the dominant place that people have been putting money in, because they believe that the dollar is going to continue to lose its purchasing power as more and more debt is created to pay for stuff that we can all question. But the longer, or the more money we have in dollars, the cash in your bank, other assets, the less power, it's like a melting ice cube, less purchasing power those dollars are going to have. And so what happened this year in January of 2024, that had never happened, it was never available before, was that the SEC of the United States, the Securities and Exchange Commission, approved for sale exchange traded funds that buy and hold Bitcoin, the asset. That was not available previously. Why is that relevant and a big deal? Well, prior to this, it was very challenging for the average person who isn't computer savvy. It was challenging for them to get access to the Bitcoin market, to even own any Bitcoin. Now that it's been approved, these ETFs have been approved by the SEC, and it's fully available for everyone to own these exchange traded funds. And so when money goes into the exchange traded funds, the funds have to buy Bitcoin. They have to hold it. And so these funds, specifically BlackRock's, have seen the biggest amount of money come in the history of exchange traded funds, and they've only been out for about 2 months now.
Wow.
And this is before people have begun seeing this option show up in their 401k plan or their retirement plan. This is before. We still have yet to see advisors in the investment industry begin to allocate some of their clients' assets towards it. So because it's limited in supply and the demand is only getting bigger, that's the reason you're seeing the price of one Bitcoin increase. The value of one sat is going up because there's a limited supply and there's a growing demand, and we're only in the beginning phases of this for the masses. It's been around since 2009, but it's only this year that the masses will be able to have access to it. And that's why it's such a big conversation right now. And the last thing I'll say about this, about Bitcoin specifically, is that in April, the amount of Bitcoin available to be mined, again, the mining is computers doing the accounting. The amount of Bitcoin available to be rewarded for doing the mining will be cut in half. That was written into the software. And so now all of a sudden we're at a point where the masses have demand for it, but the supply available, the new supply available, is going to get cut in half. Well, we all know the laws of supply and demand. If you shrink the supply of something while the demand goes up, we know that the price is going to increase.
Yep.
That's what we're beginning to see. Hopefully that answers the question.
It does. I think we may need a follow-up, but this is great to start, and thank you for making it fun and simple to understand. I think a lot of people will at least have a little bit more of an idea now of what's going on, how to purchase it, and more
Mm,
importantly, how to learn more about it, because that's really the important thing, is getting people educated on what it actually is. So thank
absolutely.
you, Brian.
You
Things
got
that
it.
matter with Brian Batter. Never disappoints.